wondering how I got into this mix.
Hey, what's up everyone? This is Derrick Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is Friday, November 17th, 2017, and today I want to talk with you about probation, parole, the prison system, the mass incarceration in the United States, and all of those issues, my experience in those institutions, and how it relates to a current story taking place right now. This morning I woke up and I saw this op-ed piece from Jay-Z, the rapper Jay-Z, to the New York Times. He contributed, and it's called "The Criminal Justice System Stalks Black People Like Meek Mill." So if you don't know anything about this, if you don't know anything about who Meek Mill is or who Jay-Z is, then this might be a little bit out of your norm. But I think it's important to look at it because it relates to a bigger picture of what's going on in this country, and that is mass incarceration and the amount of people who are in these institutions. So I'm going to read you a little bit of what Jay-Z wrote, and then we'll talk about it. He says, "This month, Meek Mill was sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison for violating his probation. Free Meek hashtags have sprung up, and hundreds of his fans rallied outside of City Hall in Philadelphia to protest the ruling. And on the surface, this may look like the story of yet another criminal rapper who didn't smarten up and is back where he started. But consider this, Meek was around 19 when he was convicted on charges relating to drug and gun possession, and he served an 8-month sentence for that. So he was arrested when he was 19, drugs and gun possession, served 8 months, did his time, paid his debt to society, as some people like to say, and now he's 30, 11 years later, and he's been on probation since then, since he got out, basically his entire adult life. And for about a decade, he's been stalked by a system that considers the slightest infraction a justification for locking him back up." Now, Jay-Z goes on to talk about how he saw people growing up in Brooklyn, people getting locked up and getting caught up in probation and then going to prison, and getting on parole just for simple things like missing a curfew violation. And this is definitely true. Now, this is an important part here. He says, "Taxpayers in Philadelphia, Meek Mill's hometown, will have to spend tens of thousands of dollars each year to keep him locked up. And I bet none of them would tell you his imprisonment is helping to keep them safer. He's there because of arrest for parole violation and because a judge overruled recommendations by a prosecutor and his probation officer that he doesn't deserve more jail time." So, that part's really important. Probation officer and the prosecutor said, we don't think he needs to go to jail. The judge overruled that and sent him to jail anyways. So he, they go into more of the details of the situation. You can read this short op-ed here to get a better idea on that specific situation. But as I said, this has given me a chance to talk about something that's even bigger than that, and that's just this, this story in general, how people who get on probation and get caught up in the system can lose their whole lives, because of just the way, when I was locked up, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. When I was locked up, though, when you sign for probation, people talk about it like you have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, because the slightest thing can send you right back to prison or to jail or some kind of, involuntary institutions. So let me read a little more of what Jay-Z wrote here. "The specific of Meek's case inspired me to write this, but it's time we highlight the random ways people trapped in the criminal justice system are punished every day. The system treats them as a danger to society, consistently monitors and follows them for any minor infraction, with the goal of putting them back in prison." So as of 2015, 1/3 of 4.65 million Americans were on some form of parole or probation. He says then they were black. Black people are sent to prison and probation at much higher rates than white people. You can do the research and check out those stats if you like. I think this is an important part right here, though. It says in Pennsylvania, hundreds of thousands of people are on probation or parole, no matter what color they are. Hundreds of thousands of people. About half the people in the city jails in Philadelphia are there for probation or parole violations. So more than half in the jail there for violating their parole and probation in some way, sometimes really simple, tiny infractions, not even catching new charges or doing anything really criminal. We could literally shut down jails if we treated people on parole or probation more fairly. And so he goes on from there. I'll put the link for that in the description below if you want to look into that. But, my whole thing here about talking about this issue is, so I went to prison. I was arrested in 2005 for possession of a controlled substance, and I was 20 years old. I was about to turn 21. I ended up doing 11 months on that sentence, plus probation. So I got sentenced to time and probation when I got out. So I had 2 years probation plus an 11-month sentence. I got out, violated probation I was pissing dirty, right? And obviously if the state has you in their hands and they put you on probation or parole, you can't do what they say. You know, that means when I got out, they don't care if you're getting out without a job, without a vehicle. They want you to make, you know, a couple of AA meetings a week, a couple of other treatment meetings a week, weekly probation officer meetings, random drug tests every week. You have to call on this phone number, and you either have to be in school full-time or at least part-time with a job. You have to do one or the other, like have a full-time job or be in school with a part-time job or some combination of that. I think also on another level, this sort of system, this probation parole, the things that they consider to be moral and, you know, living a good citizen, upstanding citizen's life means paying taxes into the system, working a 9-to-5 job that you might not even like, but at least you're being productive, right? And that's what the system wants, is productive worker bees. So I feel on another level, this whole probation parole thing is just a way to keep people into that system and not really, because you can't just say, no, I'm gonna just play music and figure out how to do this, or I want to travel, I want to do, you know, the state has you by the balls because they've said you've committed some kind of crime that we consider to be wrong, and, you know, you did time, but we're still going to punish you, you have to pay us this money. It's extortion in the long run, so you really have to just be on your best behavior until you get off, and not so you can go back and be a criminal, because a lot of people who get caught up in the system aren't even criminals. I was locked up with people who were, one kid was like 17 years old and he got caught with some Adderall at school, and then he's locked up with all these adults, some who are actually dangerous criminals, and then he's on probation, and just, you know, the whole system. I'm not saying we're not gonna have to deal with people who commit actual crimes, but I don't think people should be locked up. That's a whole other thing that this piece by Jay-Z didn't even address, is that you have lots of non-violent, victimless crimes that are being charged. They're not even really crimes, it's an oxymoron, but they're victimless, and people are being locked up for them, then they're being put on probation and on parole, and then the system is able to gain so much. They get to lock up people, and, you know, you do the numbers on not just private prisons, but the place I went to here in the Houston area, the city and certain judges, from what I hear, you know, they get kickbacks. They get a certain amount of money for every single person. The number we heard back then was that it was like $10,000 per person that they sent to these institutions, and they call them like treatment centers, but they're prisons. You're surrounded by razor wire, there's armed guards, you can't leave, and they give you like a counselor that you talk to like once a week, but other than that, you're eating prison food, you're in a prison, and but they get paid, you know, certain extra for telling the state, like, okay, we're going to sentence them to treatment. And so there's a lot of things like that, shady stuff going on within the prison system, where it becomes incentivized to lock people up for victimless crimes, and then to put them on probation and put them on parole, so that when they get out, you know, the whole idea, I think, if you take it take it with a grain of salt, like, let's assume they really mean what they say, then the idea is that when somebody is being rehabilitated, which prisons don't do, they just can make people worse. And really the only reason my life has changed, and people I know like me who've changed their lives and gone in a completely different direction, you know, I went from being homeless and drug addicted and doing a lot of crazy things and not treating myself well and not treating others well, to doing journalism and activism and doing all the things I do now. That came from a conscious choice that I made myself. These institutions are not there to rehabilitate people, and that is something else that we should look at. So you have a system that punishes people for victimless, nonviolent crimes, and then locks them up, also, and that includes, I'll include in that victimless, nonviolent, smoking cannabis or possessing cannabis, or really, to me, any drug that a person chooses to ingest in their body. If they're not forcing other people to take it, if they're not injecting other people with it, if they're simply possessing it or using it for themselves, they're not causing anybody harm, and they should have the freedom to do so. This is why people who have a drug problem should be treated like patients, not criminals, because when you turn them into criminals, people are less likely to seek help. So thus, you start criminalizing people who are actually in need of help, people who have gotten onto drugs because they're trying to self-medicate or escape certain issues, and then they go down this rabbit hole of bad drug addiction. They can't get help because the system tells them that they're criminals, and if they get caught, then they are locked up. They're put into prisons and institutions, treatment centers, where people don't really care, and the state gets money out of this. Then when they get out, they're going to be on probation or parole and continue to pay and fund the state, right? And the whole idea was that when people are being rehabilitated, when they get out, you follow them and help them reintegrate back into society. That's like, if we take the probation and parole system at its best, that's what it is supposed to be. People get in trouble, you put them on a timeout, and you have, a babysitter watch them for 6 months, 7 months, a year, some people long portions of their life, depending on the actions they've done. But and you guide them back into society, right? Well, again, the problem is that this society thinks that paying taxes and working in a 9-to-5 job and just feeding the system is a good thing, and they also think that there's no value in medicines that come from the earth like cannabis and others, and that's a problematic situation. So overall, the probation, the parole system is a byproduct of the prison system and the mass incarceration taking place in the United States, and through that, people are taught to stay integrated into this system. They're taught to continue to support the same type of lifestyle, because you can't. If you go to, say, your probation officer, your parole officer, and you start talking about freedom, you think maybe that the government is problematic, or you think that corporations are problematic, and you start talking all this radical stuff, they might report you to one of their higher-ups, or they might tell their judge, this person's getting very radical. I don't know if they're on drugs or what, but they're dangerous, and so I think we need to send them back, and that could be a scary situation. So overall, I just wanted to share my thoughts. As I said, I ended up doing 10, 11 months. I went back after 5 months, did another 3. When it was all said and done, between 2005 and 2008, I did 17 months on a 24-month sentence, and then I did 7, 8 months on parole. I got a couple extensions there because I did screw up here and there, and I was smoking cannabis, but eventually I got off, and that was the happiest day of my life. And since then, 2009 till now, I try to live my life as if those people don't exist, and I work to never ever get back in their hands and back in their system. And only a few times with activism have I had to deal with them, but other than that, I stay out of their world. But there's a lot of people who are still stuck in those prisons. They're stuck on parole and they're stuck on probation, and we need to look at that. We need to challenge the system and the way that it handles those of us who go through that. And another thing, a final note here, and this is from people, person to person, us, the free, beautiful people of the world. Do not judge your brothers and sisters simply because they have an X on their back, is what we refer to it as, because they have a felony. When I got out as a felon and coming back into the world, it was really weird and interesting to see how, it's difficult to get a job, and some people might look at you differently, or as if you're dangerous when you tell them that you got out for a felony, especially, it's like drug charges or whatever it may be. And others may have it worse because they had a nonviolent or a violent history, things like that, and that's even harder for them to overcome. But even just as, say, someone with a drug charge and just a felony, some people automatically turn you down for jobs. Some people think you're just different things, and I don't know why, because a result of this mass incarceration system growing so big is that almost every single one of us knows somebody who's either in prison, has been to prison, has been on probation or parole. One of those, I guarantee you. And if not your family directly, maybe a friend or a friend of a friend. It's that extensive. So if it's so pervasive in our society, why are we judging other people for it? Instead of looking horizontally, looking at each other, we need to look upwards and see that the people who are rigging the system are using this as another way to divide us and separate us from felons and non-felons and citizens and illegals and all these different barriers and divisions, and we need to move past that. So tell me what you think about this. Let me know your experience. Have you ever been on probation, parole, prison, anything like that? Comment below. Thank you guys for listening. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.